Okay, I'm gonna do Final Fantasy 14 before I do Final Fantasy 13, just to you know what? No, we'll do Final Fantasy 13 because I want to end on a good note. I really do. Final Fantasy 13 and its sequels. Oh, speaking of sequels, Final Fantasy 10 sequel was so bad I tried to section off a portion of my brain to regress Final Fantasy 10 2. Okay? Final Fantasy 10 2 is exactly the definition of shit. It's what people do when you take somebody else's content and you decide to just profit off of it. And you do every trick in the book that you think you can to profit off of it. You do the fan service. You put a battle system that's actually pretty good. I like their battles and job system. I thought it was fine. And then you write a story that is so bad. It is... I'm sorry. Final Fantasy Mystic Quest had a fucking better storyline. I'm sorry. It did. It did. Final Fantasy X-2 is shit. It's fucking horse shit. And I'm going to do it. I will do an entire discussion on Final Fantasy X-2 and the sequels of 13. And that can be its own fucking stint. I can make a fucking show literally dedicated to that. And I don't need to go much further. Now, Final Fantasy 13. I've only played 13. I've played some of the sequels. I've played the sequels too, and I've beaten them all, but I've only played them once. And to make a long story short, there's a reason I only played them once. I can only tolerate them once. Final Fantasy 13 is a continuation of where 12 failed in many respects, and honestly, Final Fantasy as a successful franchise, which it is currently not. Okay, if you look at how they're doing as a company, they almost went bankrupt because of the direction they were going, and they don't have any intention of changing that direction. And they're pretty much doing what Blizzard did. They're going to live off of their MMO until they fucking die. Okay, until a better MMO comes out to replace them, which won't take very long. Period. But Final Fantasy 13 is fucking horrible. I understand that, but here's what I will give it credit for. I understand the appeal. I really, really do. I understand why people do get attracted to that game. And no, it's not because of the fucking breast physics, okay? No, it's not because of that. And I get it a little bit, but I'm not going to go huge into 13 because 13 is still readily available, and if you don't own it and you want to know what I think a bad Final Fantasy game is, that is a pretty bad one. But it's not... I think it's better than 12. I hate to say it, I think it's better than 12. It has more redeeming qualities than 12, but it's still the fucking king of shit mountain. Of all the bad Final Fantasies, you know, I look at, like, I sit there and go, it's better than Final Fantasy X too. And that's as far as I can go. I'm not going to say much. I have not much to say because there's nothing to say about it. That's interesting. I'm sorry, all the characters are boring. There's no real drama and drawn out. They're all very cliched. The story is, to me, that's a linear story. If you say Final Fantasy X is linear, you haven't played 13. 13's fucking worse than that. Okay? And even people from the company have said that. Not in a bad light. They say, oh, it's linear. It's even more linear than Final Fantasy X, so you find yourself more immersed in the world. And when I heard that article, I just screamed. I yelled at the magazine, bullshit! All right, I'm sorry. I grabbed the computer monitor. It was on the website, actually. I grabbed the monitor, and I was like, bullshit! You fucking liar! It's fucking horseshit! You don't get more immersed because the storyline's linear. You get more immersed because the characters are interesting. Your world is interesting and well-developed. Your plot, your overall character's goals, and what you're setting them out to do actually means something to the people playing the game. If it's a big deal in your world, show that it's a big deal in your world and express it in a way that communicates to other people. That game did not do it. They did things that they felt were important in their world and was a big deal, but they never could emotionally describe it. They could never express it through words. Jesus fuck. They couldn't even do that. Lightning was fucking useless. Snow, fuck you in the asshole with a big rubber date. And the list goes on and on and on. With so much that could be said about it. With so much that really went on with it, I'm sorry, I didn't like it. And then Final Fantasy X, 2, and 3, and the traveling back in time and all of that shit. I'm sorry, you can't take Final Fantasy 13 and turn it into Chrono Trigger and expect a success. Okay? Chrono Cross was okay, but it wasn't fucking great. Okay? Chrono Trigger was really good, and I've played Radiant, Radiant Stories, which is the technical sequel to Chrono Cross that came out for this fucking Satellaview, and that's the actual sequel to Chrono Cross. It's actually what bridges it's actual sequel to Chrono Trigger, which actually bridges. I've actually played this game, and I'm sorry, you can't. No. You've already established a cast of characters that are hardly likable. And the only reason people did like it was because of the boom mechanics. I'm sorry, I am going to go that. I am going to stoop to that. So, at least in 13.2 and 13.3, Lightning Returns, I'm sorry, those games are shit, and they should have known that going in. The only people you're going to appeal to are stupid kids who really just want to be ogled by good graphics and bounce and boob physics. That's the audience you're drawing. And there's a lot of fanboys, and for a lot of you fanboys who have been around for a lot of the Final Fantasy games, for a majority, and I'm talking pre-PlayStation, please stop sucking the tit of Square Enix, okay? They fucking suck. And here's the deal. When they bought Enix, they went out and killed pretty much every game series that Squaresoft bought from Enix. Okay, Dragon Quest is now becoming online, and that's where RPG games go to die. There's a Breath of Fire MMO coming out. Again, where games go to die. When they bought, my understanding is when they bought Enix, they also picked up Grandia, and made and it became Grandia Zero, the MMO, and I think that actually they stopped the servers for that one. But it's where fucking games go to die. They haven't produced a good RPG since 10. And that's what, 2002? You know, give or take a year or two, depending on what region and country you lived in. And that's me being generous. And that's excluding the MMOs just because you can't compare them to console games. You just can't. So obviously it's apparent I don't like 13, and I don't have much to say because the villains are bad. The main cast is dull. They're boring. I don't want to even talk about the game mechanics. It's the furthest thing from a Final Fantasy game than 12 in many respects. I'm sorry. So this is one of the points where I say that they've gone so far off the spectrum that I've lost faith in them, because guess what? There are other people doing it better than them, and that's fucking sad. Okay, these were the guys that literally defined a style of games. And then to go against everything you created and what made you famous and rich, yeah, that's how companies fail, assholes. And they don't get it. They don't get it. And they don't care. And I think it's a pride thing, because if they felt that they went back to the format that the old Final Fantasies did, they would be sucking off the intellectual teat of the people they chased out. Those people didn't get fired. They didn't get fired. They personally chose to leave the company. The original Final Fantasy creators, writers, and designers. Because they were going in a direction they didn't want to go. And the company wanted to go that way. And that's fucking sad. It is. And you know what? Lost Odyssey is actually pretty good. This is Mistwalker, the company that these guys started. And Blue Dragon's okay too. And the Lost Story is okay. They're not bad, but they're not great either. So they're still trying to find their niche, I think. They're still trying to find their place again in the world of games, and I don't think they ever will. I think they're going to start getting into the age where they don't really care anymore. And if I would feel bad for them, because I'm sure it feels like to them they've had their intellectual property pretty much taken from them, stripped down butt naked, and fucked in the ass against its will. And, you know, again, like I said, other people are doing it better now. They really, really are. So, and they're not, and in all honesty, I do hate to say this, the golden age of RPGs died in the hands of PlayStation 2 and Xbox. When those companies skyrocketed into where they are today, there's so few RPG games that are coming out that are even a fragment of what the genre was made the most money. And I shit you not, if any of them actually went back to that format, they would if one of these fuckers made a AAA title that was in the style of, let's say, Final Fantasy VI, Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy IV, and they brought it to a 3D level, to the quality of, let's say, White Knight Chronicle visually. If they actually did that, they would corner a market. They really, really would. Is that ever going to happen? And I don't see it. I mean, Level 5 has done a lot of good things. They're the ones that I'm looking at and focusing all my effort towards. Because if anybody's going to do it, it's going to be them. Because they have done it ever since the end of PlayStation 1. They did it with Dragon Quest 8. You know, look at that game. Holy fucking horseshit in a handbasket. That's one of the best RPG games on the PlayStation 2, hands down. And they did it right. They took a concept that they did, and they brought it to that version of the game. And they kind of did it with Ni no Kuni, and the visual aspects were kind of there in White Knight Chronicles 1 and 2. And then we don't really hear anything good from them for some time. And probably won't. But Level 5, if you're looking for a game like Final Fantasy, keep your eyes on Mistwalker and Level 5 Studios, and keep your toes, your fingers, your nostrils, your testicle hairs crossed that they can follow through on it. So, but now let's get back to Final Fantasy. But that's my point, you know. There's not gonna. I've seen Final Fantasy 15 on display. The closest thing to a Final Fantasy game coming out of Square Enix is pretty much Bravely Default, which is actually really, really, really good until the end. Until the last maybe 6 to 8 hours of gameplay. And all that momentum they build, you're just kind of sitting there going, okay, this is fucking dumb. And they're making a Bravely Default 2, which is really just kind of taking from Final Fantasy, what is it, Crystal Saga? Not Crystal Chronicles, it's not those games. But they're really just rehashing Final Fantasy V. I know a lot of people hate that comparison, but they really are. They it's just Final Fantasy V all over again, which was okay. And ironically, their story is somewhat similar, of not two worlds merging together, but different outcomes in different parallel universities, whatever. But that's what a lot of people like that game far better than like fucking Final Fantasy 13. Oh man, the kind of outcry for that game was people played it and were like, "Oh my god, Square Enix, you can actually pump out a Final Fantasy game that doesn't suck big floppy donkey dick. Thank you. Oh, Evan, yeah." And this fully brings us around to Final Fantasy 14. It's good. I don't know what else to say. The story premises is mainly pretty decent. It's written by the same group of jacktards that did jackholes that did Final Fantasy 11, and 11's story was fine. I liked it. I thought it was great, and the expansions were pretty good. And moving on from that, you know, it's an upscale version of WoW, from my experience playing WoW, which isn't very vast, but it is in a sense. It's a very upscale, flashy, colorful WoW. It is slowly replacing World of Warcraft as the main MMO to take the stage, but I don't think it's going to last as nearly as long as WoW. WoW had a much more dedicated grouping, a following, and all that, but because literally, as far as I'm concerned, I'm surprised Blizzard didn't fucking sue Square Enix after Final Fantasy 14 came out, but you know what? That's a whole nother argument for a whole nother time. It's good, but you know what? I played it. I played through the whole thing. I played through a couple of expansions all the way up to Odin. And really, I just felt like I was rehashing the same game over and over after that. Once I beat the game, the storyline seemed so irrelevant, I just couldn't do it anymore. And real life issues came up, and the amount of time it took to keep on the top of the food chain in that game, the commitment, I just couldn't do it anymore. I wanted to do more. I wanted to do other things with my life, you know? And so that's why I'm not a huge MMO guy. I'm really good at them. I've played a whole bunch of different ones, from Ragnarok, Ragnarok 2. I played a lot of them, but I still, 14 is fine. It's okay. And guess what? That's what kept them from going bankrupt. If you ever look at their stocks and you follow any of their company statistics monetarily, you know that's the game. That was the game when it came out, their stocks went through the roof. And, they finally figured something out. It's not a Final Fantasy game, not to me anyway, but they fucking figured shit out. So, we've completed all of that. That's all the Final Fantasies. I'm not going to talk much about 15 because it's probably going to suck ass. It'll look amazing. It'll look phenomenal. It'll probably be a literal ripoff of Uncharted, The Last Story, and Final Fantasy 13 put together. And you know what? Fuck you and the horse shit came on. I'll probably get it. I'll probably cry myself to sleep and then take it out back and take a huge diarrhea shit on it after consuming an entire bottle of Go Lightly, because that's the only relief that I will get most likely from 15. And maybe if 15 fails, if a lot of people are willing to just let 15 fail and not let curiosity get the best of you, if you're willing to let them fail, they'll understand. Maybe then they'll figure it out. Maybe then they'll let Yoko Shimomura, I'm sorry. They'll let people with real concepts of how to build good RPG games take the reins over again. Who knows? But at least it might tell them to stop making this type of fucking shit. Hopeful thinking, but don't count on it. So, what do I think of Final Fantasy as a franchise? Okay, is it the greatest RPG franchise of all time? No, it is not. It is definitely not. It is the best marketed. It is the best supported for a long time. It was the heaviest supported in the U.S. It did a lot of things right in a majority of its career. It's definitely those are the definitive reasons why those games are staples in everybody's hearts and minds. They defined a genre. They tried to enhance it as best as they could. I think they did, and they experimented a lot, which worked, and sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. And they were pretty gutsy in the direction that they were going, and I admired the way that they tried to do it. Every Final Fantasy for a long time never had a sequel, or when it did, it came out much, much later. And yeah, Final Fantasy X-2 is not the first real sequel to a Final Fantasy story, because Final Fantasy V actually had a short anime miniseries called Final Fantasy, the story of the Legend of the Crystals, I think, or some shit that came out in like 1996 or 7 or something. And it was a shitty anime. I have it somewhere. I actually do have it. Ooh. And I have Final Fantasy Unlimited, which was also really shitty. But I have them to say that I have them. Yeah, I have Final Fantasy. The Spirits Within. And I really, Nostalgia Critic, I want to do a crossover with you on that. If I never probably will get to. He's way too internet awesome for someone like me. But yeah, and I have a lot of that shit. And yeah, I was a Final Fantasy kind of person for a long time, and there's proof of it too. But I wasn't a dedicated follower. I played games that were fucking good because they were fucking good. There's so many games out there that are better than Final Fantasy. So I do urge you, if you are a Final Fantasy fanboy and you think nothing will be better than Final Fantasy ever, please, I urge you to go out there, play Grandia, play the PlayStation release of Lunar, the Silver Star Story, complete. Play, Albert Odyssey wasn't even that bad for the Sega Saturn. Those were pretty good. Shining Force 2, not bad either. Not a good place to start. I'm trying to think of, like, fucking awesome RPG games that definitely could beat half of the Final Fantasy games out. Breath of Fire's 3 and 4. 4 if you really don't like that style. If you go with 4, you'll be happy. 3 is kind of hit and miss. but it's still really good. Legaia is surprisingly underrated. I don't know why it is, but it is. Legend of Dragoon's pretty good, but it has its flaws. There's so many good RPGs. So many. Wild Arms, 1 through 3. Holy shit. I love Wild Arms games. 4 or 5 are... But 1, 2, and 3 are great. From beginning to end, they're good. And yeah, 2's a little complex and convoluted. It's hard to get through, but those are good games. And they came out on PlayStation 1 and 2. You know, you can still find copies of them. Shadow Hearts. Wow, Shadow Hearts 1 and 2. Great games. I wasn't a big fan of the third one. And they changed their style, which is probably the reason I started losing favor with them. Obviously, the Grandia series. If you've not played Grandia's 1 or 2, shame on you. Grandia 3 is kind of weak, so I wouldn't start with that one. It's definitely not a Grandia 1 or 2. And for those of you who are wondering, Grandia 2 uses a majority of the voice cast used in Metal Gear Solid. Yeah, you might want to check that out. It's nice hearing General Campbell, Lieutenant Campbell, I forget what his rank was, but hearing him as Sky the Hawk is kind of funny. It really is. I'm sorry, it is kind of hilarious. But the voice acting is good in those games, and the storytelling is amazing. And those are just examples. The Xenogear game, Xenogear and Xenosagas are pretty good. I can keep going on forever and ever and ever. Of all these games, that actually, in many cases, some of them are a lot better than a Final Fantasy game. I like to say, I honestly sometimes feel that the Soul Blazer trilogy is on par with half of the Zelda games that came out. But most people have never played one of them. What is the Soul Blazer trilogy? Soul Blazer, Terramangia, and Illusions of Gaia. And those are great games. Soul Blazer's a little rough around the edges, but Illusions of Gaia is tolerable. And Terramangia was argued to be one of the best RPGs to ever come out on Super Nintendo, next to Earthbound and Chrono Trigger. In Japan, for sure. If you want to go into the Japanese ones, Treasures of Rudra is a great place to start, and you'll find more just from knowing that alone. So, there are lots of amazing games out there that are not Final Fantasy. So, is Final Fantasy great? It did a lot of things right. It did a lot of marketing things right, and it got itself into the public eye in the United States really, really well. Where other games came out on shitty consoles that didn't do well, that didn't have support, like Sega did not really support the RPG genre at all. They openly said that they never released a lot of RPGs on it because Americans didn't like RPGs. That's what they really believed. To the letter, you can find articles where the president of Sega America had flat out said Americans only play fighting games and racing games and sports games. That's all they care about. And gun games at some point, I'm sure. And we know that's not true. We know that's not true. We know that RPGs, even to this day, would do phenomenal if somebody would take a step back and make a AAA title that is in the style of ye olde format without trying so hard to be original, as opposed to just tell a good fucking story. That's why Final Fantasy IV and Lunar, the Silver Star Story, get remade time and time again. That's why Earthbound is always on demand to be re-released, because people want to play them because they're good games, they're good stories, they're good franchises, and there's always going to be money to be made if you can do the fundamental things correct. It's not always about graphics, it's not always about gameplay in some respects. It's about story and characters, and if you follow the basic rules of writing, you'll make a great game every single time, to the point where they've made examples of it. There's a game, a game made in RPG Maker called To the Moon, I think. It's got no RPG real elements to it of battle or anything like that in it. It's more of a story-driven game. And it was amazing. It was phenomenal. It sold so many copies. It was good. It won awards. And they didn't even have a fucking combat system in it. And the graphics were, in a sense, RPG Maker 2003. So not very good. Yeah. So there's proof right there that if you do those fundamental things, you will make a great, memorable, billion-dollar making game. I'm at the point where I'm really convinced if they could make a game that was at the quality of Final Fantasy 4, 6, and 7 in story, with the look of current day gaming, they would be successful. Any of these companies would be successful. And proof of that is evident. Even EA banked on it with Lord of the Rings: The Third Age. When that game came out, it was actually moderately good. It was very monotonous, but it was good. People bought it. People wanted to fucking play it. And for what it was good. It wasn't great. It wasn't fucking a triumph for the company. EA's a shitty fuck company and they know it. But they set out and did something. They emulated what other people had done, literally almost to the letter, and they actually made a profit. And that game is liked by a lot of people. And it's not a bad game. It's not a great game, but it's not a bad game. And they tried to write a new story for it. So that's the only thing original was the story. And that world was obviously ripped out of the movies. But there's an example. So, guys, I would love to discuss with you more. I really do. I'd love to discuss with you more about RPGs, good ones, bad ones. What'd you like? What'd you hate? I'm sure I pissed a lot of you off, but I think I also I reached out to a good group of you. And I know this was a long discussion. This is obviously gonna be split up into maybe 2 to 4 parts. But I do thank you guys for listening. Let's keep talking RPGs because they're not dead. They just need to be, I think, reborn and revitalized. You know what they need? They need a big ass fucking bottle of scotch and an IV stat. And let's get them back on track. I'm the RPG guy. I hope you enjoyed our discussions. Live long, prosper, and get fucked up, and have a great day. RPG guy signing off. Let's talk some more games. I'll see you on the next RPG guy talks.